Welcome to the first reading wrap-up of the Good Enough Club. I guess we'll just start off with stats for the month. I finished 18 books. I did have one DNF that was disappointing, but it's a soft DNF. 4 of the books were ones that I owned. The other 14 I borrowed from the library. 3 of the books were rereads, all of which I owned. 16 of those books were fiction and 2 of them were nonfiction. 72% or 13 of the books out of 18 were audio, and 28% or the remaining 5 were physical books. An average rating between all of them of 4.47 stars out of 5, which feels a little high, but numbers don't lie. The only DNF that I had this month was The Fraud by Zadie Smith. It's one that is on my cumulative TBR list for the year, but I started listening to the audio and it was a little too performative for me, and I just couldn't get into it. So I think if I pick it up again, then I'm gonna just get the physical book and go from there. As of right now, there are like a million holds on it though, so I'm just gonna wait on that one. The first book that I did finish this month was pretty early on in the month, and that was Finding Margaret Fuller by Allison Pataki, which I gave 4.5 stars. It was, maybe I shouldn't have given it 4.5 stars because I don't remember a lot about it. Basically, it's about this woman who is supposed to be like the most well-read woman in America, and she goes and meets all these famous writers, and she kind of has a thing with some of them. It was pretty fun, and an easy one to get through. Audiobook was great. The next book of the month was Funny Story by Emily Henry. I'm sure everybody is sick of hearing about Funny Story, but it is good. I gave it 5 stars, and it's definitely my favorite Emily Henry book. I don't give everything she writes 5 stars, but this one I thought was just the best of the best that she's come up with. It's basically a story where the 2 main characters fake date because the people they were with before broke up with them and are dating each other. So it's basically like these 2 couples are now dating the opposite pairing. I would agree to an extent when people compare it to New Girl. It has a little bit of New Girl vibes, but I would say pretty much just in like the Nick Miller sense-ish. I feel like the main male character is not quite like so funky, weird as Nick, but it is a really good time. Heartwarming. The characters have their flaws. Would definitely recommend if you want a fun book. Book number 3 of the month was my first nonfiction. It was Fight Right by Julian John Gottman. If you don't know about them, definitely look them up. They're pretty famous in the psychology, counseling world for their relationship research they've done. And I want to say the statistic is that their research can determine if a couple is going to stay together with like over 90% accuracy. I've read a couple of their books and I think they're very accessible, actionable, and the case studies that they have are always fun as well. And I gave that 5 stars. Can't go wrong with a Gottman book. Book 4 of the month was A Soul of Ash and Blood by Jennifer L. Armentrout. It is the most recent book in that series, and I'll admit when I first picked up the series I didn't realize it was not done yet, otherwise I probably would have just waited. I only gave it 4 stars. Basically, this book in the series is kind of the Midnight Sun, where it's book 1 but retold from another character's perspective. Perhaps it'll be a good call in terms of kind of reminding the readers what the relationships looked like in the beginning versus what they will look like in the next book. Next was Finley Donovan Rolls the Dice by El Casimano. If you like murder mysteries that are fun and quirky and like over the top, but not in like a creepy way, then the Finley Donovan series is probably a great fit for you. This one was pretty standard for the series. It was a good time. I gave it 4 stars, but like I said, it was fun. My first reread of the month, which I don't do a ton of rereads generally, but this one was Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott Odell. It's part of my, I think, ongoing mini TBR of books that I read in 6th grade. And like I mentioned in that video, the reason that I read it is because another author that we'll talk about later happened to be coming into town for a book release. And I was like, well, I guess I should reread some stuff that I read back then. And so I reread it, and it was still a 5-star for me. It's about a girl who ends up alone on an island after her entire tribe leaves, and she has to figure out how to survive for several years. It talks about all kinds of different things that she goes through, including the death of a family member, the wild dogs attacking, and hiding from hunters that come to the island, all sorts of things. Super great book, and I would definitely recommend it to anybody who wants a quick, like 200-page read. A couple of weekends ago, the weather was nice and I got a lot of yard work done, which meant I also got some audiobooks done. The first one was The Ladies Rewrite the Rules by Susan Allain, and I gave it 3.75 stars. It was okay, kind of like a light-hearted Regency romance, closed door. It was okay. I didn't love the characters. I didn't feel super invested in them. It did have some good humor in it, but not a lot. I bet some people really will enjoy it. I just wasn't that person. The second book that I finished that day was also my second nonfiction for the month, and that was The Many Lives of Mama Love by Laura Love Harden. And I hadn't realized I'd already read something by her. She was a co-author for a book, The Sun Does Shine, that she co-authored with Anthony Ray Hinton. This new book was her memoir about her struggles with addiction, incarceration, and integrating back into general society, getting a job, finding housing, taking care of her kids, and just managing life. It was rough, but it was good. I gave that 4.5 stars. If you want a good memoir, this is a great option. This next book was probably my biggest disappointment of the month. I'd read a couple of other things by this author and loved one of them. This book just didn't stand out for me. That book was Table for Two by Amor Towles. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but I gave it 4 stars. I picked it up and I didn't realize that it was short stories. It had a call back for a couple of them to a character from another book that he'd written that I haven't read yet. It's on the TBR, so maybe I should read that and then reread this. I am not a huge fan of short story collections. It kind of has to be the right fit for me. I also listened to it while I was doing a 10K race, and I regret that decision. My second reread of the month was The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. This is probably another one that a lot of people will recognize. And that one is another one that was on my 6th grade books list. It is about 16 people in this little town who are named as recipients to an inheritance. And it's a murder mystery. It's another lighthearted one. If you liked The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer that came out last year, you'll probably like The Westing Game. The characters are super quirky, and it's written like kind of from a quirky perspective as well. But it was a really good time. It was another 5-star reread for me. Around the time I was reading that, I was also listening to The Most Fun We Ever Had by Claire Lombardo, and I gave that one 4 stars. It's kind of one of those multi-year, multi-generation family saga type stories. Definitely a good one, but it felt a little bit longer than it needed to be. The characters were well written, but they're not ones that I'd ever want to be friends with. And I know some people don't mind reading about characters they don't care about, but I have a hard time being one of those people. And I don't think I really realized that until I read this book. They're people that you would like sit next to in work, and you would like drink your coffee together, but you would never talk about anything. At least for me. And my third reread of the month was the book that I was reading because the author was coming to town, and that book was Gathering Blue by Lois Lowry, and she was awesome. She was so funny. And rereading Gathering Blue was also another 5-star reread. And I'm so glad that I did go ahead and reread Gathering Blue, because it kind of reminded me about the themes that she writes about in her stories, as well as the story itself. But I think it's very reasonable to read it before you read The Giver. There's not like cross-pollination between the characters for the most part, if at all. Still haven't read book 3, and I have book 4 on my shelf, but I haven't read it yet. Maybe that's another series. From there, I read the book that I think is probably getting the next amount of buzz after Funny Story. Like, Funny Story is getting a ton of buzz. This book also is, and that is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, and I gave it 4.5 stars. It's almost a 5-star for me, but not quite. I think it might be my favorite of hers, though. It's about trauma from your family and found family, trust, boundary setting, and it's very fun as well. All those topics seem super heavy, and the book is heavy at times, but there's a lot of balance between that and humor and the fun and the romance, and I think it's a very fair 4.5 stars. Next was The Other Side of Disappearing by Kate Clayborn. This one was also a little bit of a disappointment for me. I really enjoyed her previous book, Georgie at Last, I believe is what the title is. But this one was just, I think, heavier than I was expecting it would be. Maybe not heavier even, just it didn't have moments where it would like spring back into levity as much as I would hope. Kind of like with the Just for the Summer, like I was talking about how it has that good balance of weighty topics, but also fun and humor, and I don't feel like The Other Side of Disappearing had as much of that. It was another one too where I just didn't love the characters that much. I didn't care about them. The writing was good. I think for some people it could be a higher rating, but for me it was just fine. These next two were really fun reads, and they're by authors that I already loved, so I kind of already knew what I was getting into. The first of those was Late Bloomer by Maisie Eddings. I gave it 4.75 stars. It was like so close to being a 5-star for me. I don't think that I'll think about it enough in the future to make it a 5-star. Something that's really great about this book is the juxtaposition of the two main characters. It's not like over the top, it's just enough. And also the neurodivergency rep is really well done. I would love to hear Maisie talk about writing this and about the characters in an interview. I think that something that Maisie did especially well was there's that whole like miscommunication trope that is really common in romance novels, and I think Maisie did a really good job with the characters figuring out how to talk to each other and how their communication styles don't naturally meet up, but they close the gap and figure things out. This next one was one that was a little bit of a departure in terms of genre, but is an author that is an automatic buy for me. And that would be Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I've read all of her other stuff, and I'm really looking forward to the next one in the STEMinist series that she has coming up this summer. And this one was different because I don't think I've really read the Omegaverse, which is something I don't really know anything about. And I feel like I know stuff about it now. There were just like some parts of the Omegaverse that I was just kind of like, it's not for me, perhaps. If she writes another book in this series, which it's kind of lined up that she will, it kind of leads there, I'll definitely read it. I will still read it. The characters were very much Ali Hazelwood type characters, and if you liked her other books and you know that you don't not like the Omegaverse, then definitely pick this one up. And it's probably good that I had two really great books before, because my last book of the month was a dud. I did not enjoy it. It was not what I was expecting. I almost DNF'd it, to be honest. And that book is Year of Wonders by Geraldine Brooks. I read Horse a couple of years ago and really enjoyed it, but this one I was not into. I felt like it was really slow. It was another one where I couldn't get invested in the characters. It is about a 1666 plague town, and it goes all the way from the plague hitting the town to them like maybe starting to recover from it. And there's some like funky relationships. It's kind of has like Scarlet Letter vibes. I just did not enjoy it. Other people I'm sure will really like it. Yeah, I wouldn't reread it, and I wouldn't recommend it broadly. So that is everything in the April 2024 wrap up. I have already finished 2 or 3 books here in May. We're on May 3rd right now. And currently I'm reading the new Carly Fortune book. I was out doing my 5K a day May run this afternoon and listening to that. And I'm warming up to it. The first 2 chapters or so were not to my liking, but it is improving, so I still have a lot of hope about it. Anyway, I will talk to you later. I don't know how to end this. It feels like I'm ending a phone call, leaving a voicemail. I will talk to you later. And for now, that is just good enough. Be sure to go support your local library. It was fine though. I'll just say that a lot. It was fine, but I think it's very reasonable to not read it before. What? Oh, Stella, lay down.